It's time for PaleoRadio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering PaleoRadio.
Welcome to PaleoRadio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Thank you so much, Angela, for that introduction. Oh, what an amazing day it is to be alive, everybody. I am the trollish thorn in the side of hack journalists everywhere, Jeremiah Bannister.
And I am Joe Elder.
And you're listening to PaleoRadio. Listen, this is going to be a totally awesome show.
This is going to have a lot of different things involved.
This is going to have a lot of different things involved. We want to thank everybody who's tuning in right now on WPRR 90.1 FM and 1680 AM, 95.3 FM. There's a whole bunch of AM FMs that are that are following us here, and we want to invite every single one of you to give us a call throughout the show at 616-656-1680.
Yes, and we have a fantastic lineup, as always. We're going to start off with the Southern Poverty Law Center saying that Maajid, Nawaz, and Ayaan Hirsi Ali are terrorists, or extremists at least.
Yeah, they're extremists, and That's an interesting line there between what's the difference between an extremist and a terrorist. I guess extremists will resort to terrorism.
Yeah.
Right, and so we're going to talk about that hit on certain brands of atheism.
Yeah,
right?
Well,
it's true.
That's actually going to be the crux of the argument. There is what we're focusing on is that type of rhetoric that they're using is not dissimilar to what a lot of people in some atheist communities are saying, myself included, which says that I may be selling hate speech here over WPRR airwaves.
This show.
Yes,
this show and what we've done. Hey, listen, I invite Southern Poverty Law Center, I guess, go check out our podcast and see if we line up with that. I'd like that to be out in the open.
Interesting thought.
After that, we've got a conversation. This is actually a little bit off the radar normally.
It's
a little funzy. There's a whole bunch of funsies in this episode. But we're going to be talking about a strange message coming from the stars and that it's probably, quote unquote, from aliens.
Yeah.
And this is according to scientists.
According to some scientists from the Independent. Then there's also SETI, the Space Institute, looking for extraterrestrial life. They've weighed in on this too. So there's a bunch of conflicting theories about this, but one thing's for sure, it's going to be a fun thing to talk about.
And then after that, we're going to dive in head first to something we've never really done before. Joe and I, we spend a lot of time talking, and throughout the week we go over to one another's homes and talk. And yesterday, as he was leaving the house, we both agreed that there are so many topics right now, so many, that it was really hard to pick a third one. So what we decided to do was that we're going to talk about a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a smattering.
And we're going to open it up to the airways for people to call in and talk about different things as well if they'd like to do that. And again, the number would be 616-656-1680.
And this is conversations. Listen, we'll give you a little tasty here with this. Shadow government.
Yeah.
And this goes back
video evidence.
Yeah, when I said this, when I brought it up yesterday, we had some friends over to the house and I brought up this video. Everybody kind of looked at me like it was an outrageous sounding story, right?
Yeah.
And it is. It's outrageous. And it's almost unbelievable. But it's on C-SPAN.
Yeah, and so now we definitely have to talk about it because you teased it well enough.
Right. And then a possibility that we'll throw something out about the pedo plot against Julian Assange. That's really, really interesting. Or I definitely 100% want to say something about a writer over at the Intercept who I think is a total goon. And then I guess the last thing on my agenda that I want to bring up is the bet we have, Joe.
Yes, we have a bet on Hillary Clinton's health in 4 years. And if she's going to, it's not if she's going to survive her 4-year presidency, but it's to see if she has any ailments that will withhold her from doing her duties.
Yeah.
So we have a $20 bet on that, 20 bones.
20 bones. And listen, we threw some stuff out on Twitter. We kind of had a little exchange. It was a bunch of fun. So there's tons of stuff. 616-656-1680. All right. Down to the real serious one, Joe.
Yeah.
The situation here with the ex-Muslims and people who speak against Islam in ways similar to ourselves, in fact. And there's an article that I went to go read, and I know that you have one from The Friendly Atheist, but I was reading one over at the xmuslim.com, and this is by Sarah Hayter. Principles in Politics, the Southern Poverty Law Center loses the plot. Now, Sarah is the co-founder of Ex-Muslims of North America, a community building organization for ex-Muslims across the non-theist spectrum, and she can be reached at Sarah the Hater on Twitter, so you can go ahead and you can find her there. And Hater is Haider. She begins by saying, in addition to threats of violence by Islamic fundamentalists, liberal critics of Islam are increasingly abandoned. At best, we are inconvenient afterthoughts. At worst, bigots and hate mongers. And this is something you've brought up actually on the show a number of times, talking about, and not just with them. I'm trying to think of the other guy
Faisal Saeed al-Mutar.
Yes, and how that's what he's talking about all the time, is that weird place that people like him find themselves in between, on the one hand, the crazy, Durka dominionists on the crazy Islamic side, and on the other side, you have liberal regressive types who say that you're an extremist, or that, yeah.
Well, and he talks about being like the definition of a rock and a hard place, where he says the irony is that you leave a country like Iraq, which is where he was from, where he grew up in an Islamist home, and he said you leave that place and you come to the United States and you want to talk about how that religion has affected you in many ways, similar to how Christopher Hitchens talks about Christianity, or Sam Harris talks about Christianity, or Richard Dawkins. The list goes on and on. Mm-hmm. And he says, but when you do that, you're met with a group of people that are actually not on the right but on the left in America that go after you for saying those sort of things and calling you an extremist. And this kind of backs up that claim when the Southern Poverty Law Center states them as people that are speaking out and having hate speech. They're people who have come from those cultures and are looking at ways of modernizing the culture. Like, for instance, Ayaan Hirsi Ali's foundation is basically focused on ending honor killings and genital mutilation. Those are her two focuses. Now, I don't know if she's ever said that all of Islam needs to be ended outright. I know she said some controversial things, no doubt. But I do know that her main focus is on the liberation of women under Islamic law, which she thinks is a precursor or something that is holding women down in those cultures. Now, this is someone coming from that culture. So it's at least important to be offering an ear to what they say.
Yeah, the Anita Sarkeesian crowd over at the Twitter censor world went against a guy who had, Stop Enslaving Saudi Women? Yes. That was a hashtag, and was talking about the guardianship laws, which, by the way, ladies in the United States, feminists, you really ought to check those out. Those are really, really patriarchal.
Yes.
Those are really, really terrible, absolutely despicable laws that no feminist in the United States would say, hey, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And so, but for his hashtag and the hashtag campaign, shadow banned, censored, and then the guy who was promoting it ended up being locked out of his Twitter and was only brought back after a hashtag campaign to free him, kind of like the Free Milo that didn't work.
Yeah.
But with this guy, it did.
Yeah.
And say, you said it kind of gives substance to this, the criticism of the left, the regressive left can look at that and say, well, see, I told you so. It doesn't just give substance to it. It solidifies it. It puts it in stone, because this is the Southern Poverty Law Center is an otherwise reputable organization with a lot of information that our intelligence service uses when monitoring and even infiltrating, right, for those purposes, infiltrating groups who share that ideology around the country.
Well, and what's very important to say is they're grouping them in with a group of people that are saying things about Islam as if it can't be tolerated in the United States. And that's not something that Maajid, Nawaz, or Ayaan Hirsi Ali are saying. They're saying that it's the role of moderate Muslims to make the religion or modify the religion and adapt it in a way that can fit a modern time. And she says, especially Ayaan Hirsi Ali is one of my favorites, says the major focus is going to be on groups that are inside the Muslim communities that make those transitions and those changes. So, in a way, if you're thinking about Islam going into the future and Islam into assimilating to other cultures and other communities the way that we would like it to do, and the way that we would like all religions to adapt and assimilate to other cultures when they go to them, how can this be a productive stance by the Southern Poverty Law Center? These are people that are trying to help.
And it's like there's an expectation that it just remain in its sacred state as it is.
Yes.
It's kind of a special snowflake in the world of religion. Every other religion, especially Christianity, let's be real, especially Christianity, they encourage the idea that people abandon fundamentalist notions that are at bare minimum antiquated.
Yeah,
right?
well,
medieval stuff. That you say that's not good to have that, and yet for whatever reason, this over here is seen as that's sacred land.
Yes,
that's sacred territory. If you do the same exact thing you do to Christianity, if you say the same thing about the religion of Islam, all of a sudden, man, you are now with the crazies on the list.
Yeah. Well, and this is a tip of the hat to Christianity, in my view, is that Christianity can handle this type of rhetoric and these type of jokes and not react in the same way. For instance, I can say this. This is a good example of how the regressive left has been involved in this. In Texas, they had a Draw Muhammad contest. Is that in good taste? Absolutely not. It's kind of a disgusting thing to do. But here's the deal. Do they deserve to be attacked for it, like violently, shot for it? That's the thing, is who's more wrong in this situation? Because I know that what happened in that situation was those people had a Draw Muhammad contest. They were attacked by some people that were of the Islamic faith that thought it was in ill taste, and they actually were shot up. Now, those people that shot them hurt other people, and the statements that were made afterwards were, well, that's what you get when you have a Draw Muhammad contest. Now, to me, it's, why are we not focusing on the people willing to actually hurt other people for making jest of the religion? Because let's be honest, again, look at Christianity. That is a religion that can seriously take some heat because they don't seem to be responding in that way.
Hey, sorry, girl who got raped. It's because of the way you dress.
Yeah.
I mean, it is
almost like that.
It is almost like that. You know, sorry, Planned Parenthood, the kind of stuff coming out against pro-life people.
Yeah.
That triggered us. Sorry for bombing you.
Yes. And absolutely, that is antagonistic. I'm not disagreeing with it at all. That is the way it is. But when you're in a country like America, this is what happens. You get Jesus on South Park doing a daily talk show and all that sort of mess, right? Like, that is the way that it is. And it's like Trey Parker and Matt Stone said, the creators of South Park. It either is all okay or none of it's okay.
Yeah, and the picture that they used for Nawaz was the Jesus and Mo one, where it had I think Jesus behind him, and he said, "Hey," and then Muhammad said, "How you doing?"
Yes.
And that was the picture they used on this. You know, I thought it was interesting that Media Matters for America was involved in this.
Yeah.
In the research, and I'm thinking, wait a second, that's David Brock, isn't it? I mean, isn't that the guy in the Podesta emails that the Clinton camp thinks might be a little racist against black people?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems kind of weird that he's
that is
he's
very
involved
weird.
in that. And what the heck is up with Piss Christ? Like, why does it seem that the Southern Poverty Law Center has no problem with people leaving Christianity, criticizing Christianity, but they get their panties in a bunch when a Muslim leaves Islam and does the same thing?
Yeah, great point. Up next, aliens. Stick
Love
around.
Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Welcome back to Paleo Radio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM. Joe Elder and Jeremiah Bannister in studio. Next topic, space and aliens and signals. What an amazing treat.
You know, I think this was so much fun. I remember I saw this first. We're actually going to source a couple different places with this. You're going to talk, I think, about space.com. I'm going to mention The Independent. But when I saw the story in The Independent, you're the first person I thought of.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we talk about stuff like this.
Oh, we talk about just
we do.
stuff.
We do. We talk about it. You know, we've done some investigation work.
Yeah.
You know, we've been the sleuths and trying to figure it out like Podesta.
Yeah.
You know, at least at some point in our lives.
Sure.
Right. And so to see this was kind of interesting. And it kind of, you know, I had seen that whole video that we're going to talk about later on the shadow government with Chaffetz on it, where he asks if it's so confidential because it's about signals. Mm-hmm. And he says, is signal communication? You know, is it, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
And so I said, this is kind of an interesting little thing.
Yes. Now, and I will say too, I'm an absolute UFO skeptic. I'll say this outwardly. When people say that, though, they say that in a positive way. That means a skeptic like I believe in them. I'm saying a skeptic like I don't necessarily believe that UFOs in the sky are anything other than unidentified flying objects. It's quite a stretch to say, I don't know what this is in the sky. Next step is, it must be aliens from billions of light years away that have come to see us or integrate into our governments or yada, yada, yada. So, with that being said, it's exciting.
Right. And we don't believe in lizard people.
That's right.
So, I mean, you're never going to see us be like, is this person a lizard? Check out their eyes from this angle.
Oh, yeah, because Alex Jones pretty much has that market cleaned up,
I thought Alex Jones was against Ike on that. Because Ike, I think, is the grand originator. But anyhow.
Yes. So this is from space.com, which is a great article, I think, because it lays out some different points of view as well as the facts on what's going on. The article is entitled, Mysterious Star Pulses May Be Alien Signals, a study claims, and this is by Mike Wall. Strange pulses of cosmic light might be signals from hundreds of different alien civilizations, or just the latest false alarm in the torturous search for ET. This month, astrophysicists Ermanno Bora and Eric Trottier, hopefully I pronounced their names correctly, both from Laval University in Quebec, announced that they had spotted mysterious light signals coming from 234 different stars in our Milky Way galaxy. These pulses match the profile of signals that Bora in a 2012 paper predicted intelligent aliens might use to get our attention, the authors wrote. So that's some interesting news.
Yeah, and 234 out of the 2.5 million stars that have been observed during the survey of the sky, they found this tiny place, right, where it was behaving strangely.
Yes.
It wasn't something they were, well, in fact, they were kind of anticipating that a little bit. That's part of what they were saying is that they'd done a test before, and building off of what they had learned from that, they made some predictions about where this might be.
Yes.
And they went in there, and lo and behold, kazam kazoo, there's some crazy modulation going on in the stars.
Yes.
And
they think that they are blinking at the same time. But we have to also understand that the way that we look at stars is through lenses and refraction and side notes. That's why this is, what was it, just this year was the first time we ever got an actual video of black hole. Theoretically untrue until we've got physical evidence just now. We've known they've existed for a long time, but the way they refract in lenses when we look at them bends light in a way that makes it hard for us to see. So there's tricks that can be played with telescopes when you're looking out at distances. I just want to bring that up to play the devil's advocate. This is what Bora and Trottier said in their study, quote, "The fact that they are only found in a very small fraction of stars within a narrow spectral range centered near a spectral type of the sun is also an agreement that they may be an ETI hypothesis, so extraterrestrial intelligence." But Space.com adds, "Don't get too excited. Bora and Trottier said that the additional observations are needed to confirm this hypothesis, and that outside astronomers are even more empathetic on this point. Indeed, a healthy dose of skepticism is warranted," says Seth Shostak. Woo, that is one heck of a sentence. A healthy dose of skepticism is warranted, said Seth Shostak, a senior astronomer at SETI, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Right.
Woo.
And yeah, Bora and Trottier said, we find that the detected signals have exactly the shape of an extraterrestrial intelligence signal predicted in the previous publication and are therefore in agreement with this hypothesis. So that's the buildup to what they're saying.
Yes. And then it's also mentioned, too, that at SETI, Shostak had said that he knew 6 different reviewers who had recommended against publishing the paper, at least without significant revisions. However, he did stress that the publications at the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, which is where the article was published, is a reputable journal. So,
yeah, it's it's reputable and it's peer reviewed. That's the point. That you can say, well, I hope that you clean up these things, but if it gets in there, then guess what? Now you're being reviewed by your peers, and they're going to point these things out.
Yeah, so it's a good thing. It's a start of a process. Now we can talk about the fun stuff, which is if that was an alien civilization, should we even be contacting it?
That was the most interesting thing as we were talking privately about it. That when you brought that up. and said, listen, let's imagine that you do have a whole bunch of these signals going on, and we've discovered this, and we've recently discovered that our universe is much larger than we anticipated, far more galaxies than we anticipated, which make the odds of this
trillions.
Yeah, it makes it statistically, if you have, it's astronomical odds, and say, there's maybe just a bunch of room was made for that. But the idea that if you have a whole bunch of these, and if in fact that's what it is, the idea that it's like the movies, but the good ones, where they come and they want to just chill with you. and they're like, hey, can we work together for intergalactic peace? Like the idea that is how that's going to operate.
It's questionable. Think about what would we be like if a lesser civilization somewhere, if we had the abilities, which we don't, and this is something that I've argued that is in a way a good thing about humanity yet, is that we're incapable of doing such things. But if you took humanity today and gave us the technology to look at other star systems and find life there, how do you think we'd treat it? How would that go? And that's what I mean by saying that the guarantee that what we're finding is something that's a benefit to everybody is questionable, especially because I think movies like Independence Day are terribly false. We need to humble ourselves. We can't even get to a rock next to us. The closest we've got is to the moon. We can't even get to a planet next to us with a human being. And think about something that's blinking 23 different. What did you say? 200 and some?
It's 200 and some. 230 something.
230 some different pulses.
234 out of 2.5 million stars
from different star systems pulsing. So that's quite a bit bigger than not being able to get to the next rock.
And think about it. You know, we talk about things like two things came to mind right away. One of them being when you go to a new place, take Christopher Columbus as an example, or settlers as an example. They come, believe that they are superior, and end up, whether by intent and inadvertently, wiping out large numbers of people. And the instance where you say, what do you do when you find a new tribe that's never had contact before with other human people and Western civilization? If you show up and just waltz in and say, hey, check out the smartphone, check out the car, Land Rover I'm driving around here, that a lot of these tribes fall apart, go crazy, die off.
Plus, we have just the extra addition of people thinking that these are somehow going to be, no matter what, two-legged and two-armed people with bigger heads, and that's what they're going to look like or something. That's just crazy. Like, I mean, for people that are really into this, what they would say is that it could be arguable that they wouldn't look anything like a naked primate like us. I mean, we're just one of many. Now, this has to be said, folks, that we're just postulating out of this world right now. We're just
totally.
This is for playtime, because I will say this confidently. I don't believe that we've been visited by aliens. I don't believe that aliens came and were the precursors to structures that were made around civilization, like History Channel will let you believe. I just don't believe that jazz. I think what that is actually more likely to be is racism of white Western culture going around the world and seeing things that they couldn't build and assuming that those cultures had to have had some sort of help.
You know, I thought it was interesting that in the Independent article you have the mention not only of Stephen Hawking but Mark Zuckerberg. And I didn't know of Mark Zuckerberg's involvement with this kind of activity.
Everybody loves looking for aliens, man.
Wow, look, the old Zucky's involved. But it says they make clear that further work will need to be done to confirm or deny that hypothesis. That will need to be done by watching for the same signals on different equipment so that all other explanations can be discarded. But the Breakthrough Listen, an initiative set up this year to look for alien life and supported by people including Stephen Hawking and Mark Zuckerberg, said that the message was promising. They said that further work will need to be done before they can unequivocally be attributed to aliens.
That's right. And so this is Breakthrough Listen, which is a group of astronomers that look in and are trying to find ETI, and it's a $100 million project that's backed by SETI, by the way. They said, quote, the international SETI community has established a 0 to 10 scale for quantifying detections of phenomena that may indicate the existence of advanced life beyond the Earth called the Rios scale. Team members of Breakthrough Listen, whose science program is headquartered in Berkeley SETI Research Center at the University of California, said this, quote, the BSRC team assesses that the Borea Trottier result to currently be at a 0 or a 1, non-significant on this scale. But it also says that they should be doing more looking at those exact stars and those pulses. So they're saying there's not enough evidence yet, but it is something to take a second look at.
Well, and it said down here, it said now scientists are pouring $100 million into looking for signals in that area.
That's breakthrough listen. Yeah.
Yes. So so it's big enough that they say, listen, we're going to invest $100 million into what would be necessary in order to see if this is in fact the case.
Yes. So that that to be clear, that $100 million is already established, and Breakthrough Listen already has satellites that look up in the sky. But what they said is, on our scale, we view this as a 0 from 0 to 10. It's on a 0 to 1. But we'll point some satellites in that direction and see what we get. So I think that's also not saying to dismiss it, because they are willing to use this money towards looking into it further. So I think there's some exciting things about it, but it's also things that can make us nervous.
And I like how it ended. Right, the idea of, however, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and I thought,
boom,
this is the point. I mean, you can imagine people taking this and running, and not just doing playtime, happy, fun stuff like we're doing here, just postulating what could possibly be happening, but that they would take this and run and say, "See, told you so," and that they wouldn't have that kind of safeguard that says, "Hey, that's actually a really extraordinary claim. You need to have more evidence than that." That's the reason why we've made it simple with a 1 to 10 scale. Like, you can follow that.
Sure.
That's not a hard thing to do. And to say it tempers the situation. Science, again, tempers the situation and says, this, we've built off of predictions and models. We've discovered this. It's worthy of some attention and time, some dedication to this area. But don't freak out.
That's right. Science, proof, and evidence take time. For instance, Elon Musk says it's going to take 3 versions to get down to an affordable electric car. It's the same story here. It takes some time. It's still worth looking into, but we don't have everything together just yet. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
We're so grateful for that introduction there from Nathan Dufine. And in fact, listen, folks, Nathan's manning the boards. He's manning over there in the call room, in the call center, here at WPRR Public Reality Radio Studios in Grand Rapids, Michigan. If you'd like to go through him, talk to him. He's a happy, fun guy. Talk to him about, what is it, man? Basic income.
Yeah, that's been the good one. We've had a chat with Nathan recently. Yeah. He's oftentimes involved in our conversations at our houses, and he's been talking to us about basic income and making some decent points, and we've been having good fun having to go with that.
And on Twitter, and you can follow us on Twitter at PaleoRadio Show. You can follow me personally at Paleocrat, Paleocrat.
And you can follow me at Joe Elder Comedy.
You know, speaking of Twitter, Joe, we had a conversation privately, right? And we've actually had a number of these ones on this topic. But we recently had a conversation, and it turned into a gentleman's bet.
It did. A very cordial gentleman's bet.
Yeah, nothing outrageous. It wasn't, we didn't have ourselves a Mitt Romney moment where you're going to bet a couple grand, $20,000 or whatever it was that he said. I mean, it was just so ridiculous.
That's not our world.
Yeah, that's not our world. We're not, swimming like Scrooge McDuck in a pool of gold coins.
There are no car elevators in our lives.
Right. So, but we decided, we said, hey, we have some disagreement here on this issue, and the question came up about Hillary's health.
Yes.
And whether or not, I think this is a reasonable one. This isn't like, is she going to die tomorrow? Although that might be a bet for Bill Clinton.
I would have maybe taken that one.
Yeah, for Bill Clinton, he's looking like he's really hit. But you've got Hillary and the stuff that's kind of gone on with the, 4.5-minute coughing sprees and stuff like that, struggling with stairs, single stare. But we had the question over whether or not Hillary, any of the possible things that might possibly be going on, if that would in any way impact her over the next 4 years.
So I think that's a pretty fair bet, because that's not saying that nothing will happen, but it will be anything that can happen to her that would deter her from doing her duty as president of the United States. In 4 years, though. This is a long bet. For $20, I mean, come on, that's a pretty good one.
And it has to be connected to something that is currently kind of being postulated now. Like, it can't be something in the future. She was in an accident.
Oh, yeah.
And it was real bad. You can't say, "Oh, I told you so." I mean, you can't play that game. But I went online after I left because I said, I don't know. I don't know how confident I am in that game. And I'm like, I know it's $20, it's 4 years, not too long. I mean, it's long enough, I guess. So I'm like, maybe I'll do it. And I go home and I get on Twitter and I see this video of Hillary walking up to a stage, and she waits at the end of the stage. Everybody's cheering, and she reaches her hand out, and one of her aides runs up real fast and helps her. And with a great deal of energy, she goes up one step. And so I commented under that video and said, "You're on, Joe."
Perfect.
I will do this bet. I'll go ahead. And I think I shared, in jest, obviously, I shared an image of Hillary coughing, and it had a National Enquirer where she was quite obviously photoshopped to look really, really, really ill.
Yeah.
Like really bad. And so we're having fun with it, but it's definitely, you're definitely on, Joe.
Yeah, and which I think is a good bet. I think it's a solid one on my part, because I also think that every time we hit this time of year, the swirling around of rumors that happen about both candidates, it's even higher pitch now. But you have what's going on with WikiLeaks too. The WikiLeaks dump.
Right.
But I think that's also made people go into conspiracy theory overload, and people don't know left from right or up from down, and they're dancing all over the place. And I think that doing a bet like this is a pretty solid one that says it's a longevity bet.
Yeah.
It's a very conservative longevity bet, and it would in a way you're kind of a beacon. It's not really a bet with you. It's a bet against Breitbart that she won't die or be injured in 4 years. And I'm not saying you represent them, but we're the whole will Hillary survive her candidacy thing. That extreme
right, the
end.
Mike Cernovich, Breitbart, Milo wing.
We'll just see how it plays out, And I could be wrong. That's why I was willing to put money on it, but not a high amount at least.
And hey, it's true with all the stuff coming out about WikiLeaks, and we're not going to really focus on very much of that today. In fact, we kind of said we'd be following it, and if you want to follow it, I'm following it. I'm head first in this.
Oh, yeah.
I'm neck deep.
I think you are probably the go-to guy for the information that's in WikiLeaks of the people I know at this point, or the one who's read at least the most.
Well, and I am actively making an effort to say, and to limit the discussion to watch people as they share, and you see it kind of on the right and on the left. On the left, I don't see hardly anybody sharing stuff that has to do with WikiLeaks.
Well, of course not.
They're an overdrive hive mind
because Julian Assange calls and talks to Vladimir Putin on the phone. And Vladimir tells him exactly what he needs to dump and when he needs to dump it, and he's a troll.
Yeah,
but when the Panama Papers came out, he was a hero.
He's a
hero.
Now
he's a goon.
When the stuff came out against Bush, anything at all to do with George Bush, he was a hero. And now that you see this narrative floating around of, man, what changed with Julian Assange, man? Because now he's not a darling for our team.
Yes.
And I say, well, politics is a team sport, and everybody's pretty jazzed up with the hive mind thing going on. Mm-hmm. Morality binds and blinds. So the left says, we don't even want to look at this stuff. You can't verify it. That's the most ridiculous thing. By the way, for the record, every time you hear that from now on, you need to say DKIM. Okay, DKIM, go look it up. People have already been doing it. Institutions have already been doing it. You can verify whether or not it came from that source and whether or not it's been tampered with. So don't ever listen to Mook or Clinton or anybody saying, well, we can't verify it. Just go and do it yourself. But there's so many different things coming out that it's kind of hard to say, well, here's one story over another, because you have all these different narratives and storylines that are lining up. They've got websites. There's a YouTube page dedicated where a guy's got like 50 different long videos. He used to be in the intelligence community. I think he was involved with the NSA, and now he's talking about these things and breaking down what this stuff means. But that's a huge, daunting thing. There's no way in real time that a once-a-week show for an hour is going to be able to go, okay, today we're going to talk about this.
Yeah, and it's untimely in terms of the election, because a lot of people won't want to look at it until it's over, because people have already dug their foxholes and jumped into them, and they're sitting there waiting for voting day. Well, and not many people want to get pulled from there.
And look at the right, the way that the right does it. So the left closes their eyes and closes their ears and closes their mouth and says, me no have nothing, see here. Whereas the right, they're just thinking everything is proving the biggest conspiracy. And they will take images from the emails, highlight certain parts, and then say, Hillary said this, da-da-da-da-da. And you go on there, and it's some person who's emailing some other person in her campaign. It's not even a campaign operative. It's nothing. It's a person who it's their opinion. And sometimes it's a person who's copying and pasting a quote from somebody else, sending it to the chairman, or sending it to somebody in the campaign, and the people on the right are racing around and they're shoving it in the throat of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, well, and I feel stuck in the middle because exactly as you said, the people on the left, it's hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil thoughts. And then the people on the right are running around like their heads on fire, where it's like, it's all true. The aliens are coming, and Hillary Clinton, killed this reporter, and it's just going buck wild. So I feel like somewhere in the middle is the truth about these things, but there is very little rationality that's alive and well in the middle of this campaign season, especially right now. It's just absolutely gone. And I have to say this. We've said it privately, but I'll say it openly, is that I'm extremely disappointed with many people that I know personally that I have viewed as very rational, logical people that have decided to cast that away temporarily for a couple months because it violates certain moral grounds that they're on right now to actually address issues that they see up the pike or they see going on. And I think it's a legitimate thing. It's just very disappointing because those are the people that are supposed to be in the middle evaluating this thing reasonably.
They should be. I mean, that is what they otherwise claim to be doing. And here's the sad thing, and I know I've mentioned this a gazillion times. Go read Righteous Mind. Go read it. Read about the data and the studies that have been done on how the partisan hive mind affects both people on the right and on the left. And when you do, it's going to ruin your life a little bit.
It's going to shock awe.
It's going to shock and awe because what's going to happen is you're going to be able to predict this year. You can predict this year how your friends, how people who you look up to in the journalistic world or political world, how they'll behave 4 years from now when we're in an election again.
Can you believe that?
I can predict. I can literally predict with perfect accuracy. I haven't been wrong yet.
Do you think next year people are going to say something like, hey, maybe you can next year, but now's not the time for a protest vote. You can't do it. If you do a third-party vote, that's going to allow X to win over Y. Do you think that's going to happen in 4 years?
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. And they're going to say things like that Alex Singer for Congress guy on Twitter that says, you got to wait until afterward. The third parties need to have a better ground game. And then you ask and you say, so have you been working with them for a while, or are you going to work the day after the election to really do that? Oh, no, I have no intention of ever doing anything with that party. And I'm like, so then shut up.
Yeah.
Like, who cares what you're saying then?
Then get out of the game.
You're telling your competition, you're ruining it for us.
And I will say, this is the same thing about talking about people that should be morally and reasonably in the middle. If you feel that way about the person you're voting for and it's a vote of conscience, then it's the correct vote for you. It's not wrong.
Pure and simple.
And the other thing you can argue is, I hate to break everyone's bubble here, but the truth is, the way the Electoral College votes anyway, half your votes do not count. They don't count for anything. If you're in Georgia and you're a Democrat, your vote will not even go to your candidate. All of your electoral votes are going to go to the Republican candidate. That's how this works. The way that you have Michigan, we have 15 electoral votes. We don't split that 50-50. We don't have, if it's 49% Democrat, 50% Republican, we don't have 8 votes go to Republicans and 7 go to the Democrat. We don't do that. It goes all 15 to the winner. So your vote truly didn't count. So I'm only saying that in the sense of, if you're voting your conscience, you certainly aren't someone who's way off your rocking chair or way off your base.
I disagree with David Smalley. And I love David Smalley. David Smalley is a close personal friend. We
hosted Dogma Debate.
Yeah, we hosted Dogma Debate. In fact, we got him on the station here, first AM FM station he's ever been on.
Darren Gibson.
Yeah, Darren Gibson,
big
the man, huge, amazing. And I was in here co-hosting with him when he did Dogma Debate live here in the studio. So I care about him a great deal, but we disagree on this political position. And I'm glad that he made a video saying that you can disagree with somebody 10% and still be their friend. Because we disagree over the role of
only 10.
Right? Was it 10% or whatever? He made a very valid point.
Of him.
He made a good point, and he was talking about disagreements in the secular movement and community. And this is one that I have with him, and I've mentioned it on Twitter a couple times. I've mentioned him directly that I would like to debate him on certain claims that he's made. One of those being whether or not people should be able to vote for Jill Stein if they so desire. Because guess what? I totally 100% believe that people should feel totally fine and confident if that's what they desire, if it reflects their moral foundations and their greatest aspirations. That seems to be the best fitted for their vote.
That's right. Hey, like Jeopardy, it's a potpourri of topics still coming up. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact PaleoRadio at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you all for listening. Paleo Radio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM. And once again, you guys can call in, 616-656-1680.
And I want to give a shout-out to Lauren. Lauren is womaning the boards here.
Yes,
you can
Lauren.
see her. I've shared a couple pictures, actually, Lauren. I tagged you in one of them on Twitter. A picture of you in studio here, so if you'd like to see that, you can make sure to follow us. I'd like to also thank Darren Gibson. He's in studio today, as well as Angela, my super amazing wife, and Nathan. We have a packed house, Joe.
The many people that help make Paleo Radio run smoothly, so thank you guys for being here. Another topic I wanted to get into, this is one that's actually very recent, but U.S. inmates strike what activists call one of the biggest prison protests in modern history. Mm-hmm. So this is pretty impressive. This is from the L.A. Times by Jawed Kaleem. Excuse me. In his 29 years in prison, David Bonner has mopped floors, cooked hot dogs in the cafeteria, and most recently cut sheets of aluminum at the Alabama license plate warehouse. The last job paid $2 a day, enough to buy a bar of soap at the commissary or make a short phone call. This is slavery, said Bonner, who is 51 and serving a life sentence for murder. We're forced to work these jobs and we get barely anything. He was speaking on a mobile phone smuggled into his 8-foot cell by Alabama's Holman Correctional Facility. Sorry about that. Where he and dozens of other inmates were on strike.
Wow.
So this is something it's
$2 a day.
$2 a day.
$2 a day to go to the commissary.
Yes.
And to buy your soap, to buy your razor. Well, I guess you can't.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you'd have to buy. And so $2. Man.
So if you think about this, they're among a growing national movement of prisoners who have staged work stoppages or hunger strikes this fall to protest dismal wages, abusive guards, overcrowding, and poor health care, among other grievances. Prisoners' rights activists say the coordinated effort is one of the largest prison protests in modern history, drawing in at least 20,000 inmates in 24 prisons in 23 different states.
I've spoken to many people who've spent time in prison, some of them in Michigan, and they talk about it in purely racial terms, about how bad it is, the kind of violence, the kind of conditions that are in there, what that does to the people who are in there who may already have some issues going on. And how violent and dangerous it is. He was shanked in the neck. He has a huge, massive, one of the guys I spoke to has a huge, massive scar in his neck where he was shanked, almost died. And you hear about the gangs that are in there and how it divides up. Oftentimes it's portrayed as, well, it's Islam and Christianity. He said in his experience anyway, he said it's really black and white. He said it's more along racial lines than it is on religion lines. He said most of the people who are in the white aren't really Christian. Most of the people in the Muslim one aren't Muslim.
No, I think when you reduce people down to their lowest terms, they rely on their lowest primitive means, and that begins the idea of visually separating yourselves from others and that sort of thing. Continuing in the article, state officials have confirmed inmate protests in Michigan, South Carolina, and Florida since early September. And in California, at least 300 inmates have been involved in a hunger strike at jails in Santa Clara and Merced counties. In several states, including Virginia, Ohio, Texas, officials have denied claims by activists that strikes have occurred. Alabama officials acknowledged the protest at the Holman prison, 52 miles northeast of Mobile, though they had said it was limited to a one-day strike by 60 inmates who worked in the kitchen and license plate plant, far less extensive than the 10-plus days in September and October that activists described. So they're saying it was a one-day protest when you have people that are saying that the event went on for about 10 days or so, where people were on hunger strikes.
Right.
That's amazing.
Right. But you have competing narratives. You have one group saying, no, it lasted one day. You have people who participated said, no, it lasted 10.
Yes.
You know, I saw a video about this and how this plays itself out even in drone strikes, for example, where the way the United States responds and the way that officials respond by lowballing the number. In fact, when first it happens, denying it happened, and then lowballing the number because when people have competing narratives like that, generally speaking, people will find kind of a middle ground on that and just kind of treat it that way. But even if they did that psychologically and they turned that into, well, I can maybe 5 days, even if that's how they psychologically process that and played it out in their mind, it's still a long time.
Yeah.
And so that's so crazy.
And just to get the attention, nearly 1,000 inmates occupy a space that's built for half as many. And this is at Holman that we were talking about. The inmates call it the slaughterhouse for its death row, the maximum security Holman prison, and it says it's considered one of the most violent facilities in the South. So 1,000 people that are in a space built for half that many. In March, riots broke out. In September, a prisoner stabbed a corrections officer to death. In October, after an inmate committed suicide, prisoners said guards had ignored their screams to come help the man. And amid those protests, the U.S. Department of Justice announced this month that it will launch a civil rights investigation into prisons across Alabama to determine, quote, whether prisoners are adequately protected from physical harm and sexual abuse at the hands of other prisoners.
Wow.
So that is what had to happen just to get the launch to look into it. Activists celebrated it, saying, quote, I've been doing this work for years, and we've never got this kind of attention to prisoners' rights.
I think one reason why is because they're prisoners, for one. They don't have many very prominent that are highly visible advocates, but also because we didn't hear much in the media. The media didn't play through very well for candidates like, for example, Rand Paul. People who are working with individuals across the aisle like Cory Booker over criminal justice reform. So instead, you hear a lot of from one side that has under their belt super predator and other things like that to do with the laws that have proved very difficult for black people in the United States.
Yes.
And on the other side, you have somebody screaming about stop and frisk.
Yeah.
And so those are the two narratives right now that we're hearing played out in a very popular way about criminal justice. And that's not to say that Hillary's campaign's not talking about criminal justice. It's a big part of her platform.
It is.
But that part of the story as it's playing out in the media is focusing on stop and frisk, focusing on super predators, the crime bill, other things like that, rather than focusing on major time reform.
Yeah, which I think the one thing that is major that they're focusing on is private prisons, because that's where I think a lot of this comes from. They can put people to work, and if you're a private prison, you're generating an income. It's almost like the movie Shawshank Redemption, right? I mean, the wardens the wardens having the prisoners do favors and work favors that are getting him money on contracts. You can do that. And you can absolutely do that when you have a private prison setting. And since there's been more private prisons in the United States, we've seen the treatment of prisoners go lower and lower and lower. And just since we're on the topic, I think it's also ridiculous that after you have been convicted of a federal felony and then you've served your time and you're out, that you can't vote.
Right.
That is taxation without representation to a T.
It totally undermines the idea that someone did their time.
And is rehabilitated.
I mean, that's the whole idea is they did their time. That's what criminal law says that they had to do. That's what our society says is acceptable and reasonable. But when they get out, they not only have to deal with cultural pressures to do with having been a felon or someone who broke a crime like that, but then you would also not be able to go and vote. And you say, wow, so I'm really in a bind here.
Yeah. And to back this up, this is going back into the LA Times article. The work goes far beyond maintaining the prisons and producing goods for the government. Prison labor often benefits private enterprises. According to prisoners, the strikes this fall included inmates at Perry Correctional Institution in South Carolina who work without pay for a furniture company that operates a factory there. In an interview, Brian Sterling, who heads the State Department of Corrections, denied there was even a strike. Until it bowed to pressure from prisoner rights activists last year, the grocery store chain Whole Foods bought tilapia and goat cheese from a supplier that raised its animals using inmate labor in Colorado. So it's private.
So there's that example again of denying it happened and then having to later, under pressure, admit that it happened. This is,
Yes. The Florida Department of Corrections website says that inmates working in jobs serving various state agencies saved residents $45 million in taxes in 2014. Inmates performed almost 5.4 million hours of work in our communities, valued at more than $76 million. So, I mean, that is a
Where
lot of
can
work.
people go to learn more about that story, Joe?
You can go. It is LATimes.com. Again, the title is "This is Slavery, U.S. Inmates Strike and What Activists Call One of the Biggest Protests in Modern History." And again, it's by Jaweed Kaleem. And it really...
Yeah, so go check it out. Listen, we're running out of time, and I've been threatening to do this since the beginning of the show. And it's the end of our miscellaneous segment here. But I got in a little spat. I had one tweet, actually, that got almost 9,000 impressions so far, a whole bunch of stuff, but that was on WikiLeaks, and you can see that on my page. But I got in a conversation with a guy named Robert Mackey over at the Intercept. He wrote something back, I think, in April called "Trump Campaign Spread Dirty Meme About Paid Protesters." And he goes in and talks about how, well, that's not true. They don't do that. What a terrible thing to say about progressive protesters. And then all of a sudden, videos come out.
Lots of them.
Lots of videos, a year-long investigation where you get people saying things.
Lots of people not working where they used to work.
Yeah, let me just go ahead and give Robert Mackey a little list here of names he can look into. He can look into Bob Creamer, the guy who met with in the White House over 300 times, met with Obama over 40 times, and he was fired. He's no longer with that group. He's the main one. He's the guy you really got to look at.
Really implicate.
Scott Fovel, he went completely dark. Christina Gupana, that's an interesting case. She completely vanished. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and her law firm's website, just gone. So you got her. What about Aaron Black? How about Zuluma Rodriguez? You can see some of these people, and this is the amazing thing. Let's say you say, well, I don't like James O'Keefe's videos. I think they're highly edited, and I don't know the full context of what Zuluma Rodriguez is saying. Okay, go look at the FEC filing with Zaluma's name on there, that she's paid, and under the description of the payment, it's for bird dogging, and then go and look at the videos done by CNN and other mainstream media sites that took pictures and did videos at the protest that she claims to be part of, and Aaron Black and Scott Fovel. Go to those protests, and ta-da, lo and behold, there they are, doing the exact same thing they said they were doing, and more, that now you can look in the Podesta emails, and you can find that they're talking about having a specific sign. It was like deceit and something. It was 3 D words, right, on a sign, that they really wanted those to go around with that Donald Duck thing, right? And this comes from Hillary. That's a Hillary thing. The Donald Duck and those signs with D's on them. So you go to the protest, there's Scott Fovel holding the sign with the 3 D's on it. Yep. And so you've got multiple points. So listen, folks, go find Robert Mackey at Robert Mackey, Mackey. He's over at the Intercept, and let him know. Yeah. Let him know. Share some of this stuff with him. Let him know. Show him the different points that he can validate this, because he really needs to update that crappy story he wrote back in April.
And I know that there's a lot of people that when they hear this information still get that tinge in their stomach where they're like, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to know this is what's happening. It is what happened, folks. The Bernie Sanders rally in Chicago with all those people where they protested Donald Trump's rally. And the Bernie Sanders protesters, right? Those weren't necessarily Bernie Sanders protesters. WikiLeaks has revealed undoubtedly that it was people that were actually paid to go in there and instigate problems, and this is what Jeremiah's talking about. Now, that's a tough thing to swallow. It's a very crappy thing that happened, but it is indeed what happened, and you have to take that into account.
Taking into account, Joe, there's the music. It's the end of the show.
Man, it went by fast.
It did. I had a lot of fun with those miscellaneous topics.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. You can follow us on Twitter at Facebook at PaleoRadio and PaleoRadio Show for Twitter.
Yep, and you can go to Secular Media Group and find us there. You can also find us on iTunes and Spreaker at Paleo Radio Show.
Yes, and we're still going to have a few big content uploads here soon. And this Thursday, I will be at Dr. Grin's doing a little bit of my stand-up set. Please join me if you can. That's Thursday at 8 o'clock.
Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Listening to Paleo Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.